Back in the day, Ken Gobb had a ministry that he would do itinerant speaking, would travel around, him and his family and friends, and sometimes they would even show up on TV a little bit here and there. And he was traveling the country, going from city to city, when all of a sudden his family and friends, they stopped to have lunch, and he was just having a crisis of belief. He was telling people they can have answers, but do I have answers? I just feel like God doesn't hear my prayers. I don't feel like maybe I should do something else. Maybe I should just quit this and go find a different job, quit the ministry and find a different job. But he was praying and he was just frustrated. So he left his car just in a random city. He got out to go into a gas station to buy a Pepsi. And as he was walking, they used to have these things, this is from an ancient days, called phone booths. Anybody remember those? You remember those things? I don't know if I've ever seen one anymore, but they used to have these things called phone booths. And he was walking by a phone booth, and all of a sudden it started ringing. And it was ringing. And it was ringing. He used to be able to call them. And he was like, what is this? And he was just going to ignore it, but it just kept ringing. And he just felt like he goes up and he answers. And he says, hello. And the operator on the other end says, person-to-person call for Ken Gobb. And he was like, what? And he thought he was on Candid Camera. That used to be a TV show as well. You can see how old this story is. He's looking around and he says, that's not possible. That's not possible. And the operator said, yeah, are you Ken Gobb? We have a lady on the line looking for you. And he said, yeah. And the lady on the other line was a woman who just wrote a suicide note. And she was about to take her life, and she was praying, and she remembers seeing a guy named Ken Gobb on TV one time, and she felt like God was speaking to her through him. And she said, God, help me to get a hold of this man because I just want to give up. I'm just going to give up on my life. I'm going to take my life. Just please help me to be able to talk to this guy. And she said that in her mind came a string of numbers that she wrote down. She thought it was maybe Ken Gobb's office. She didn't know. And she called it. And on the other line, she found Ken Gobb in the middle of some indiscriminate random city at a phone booth. Needless to say, he didn't quit ministry. And him and his wife discipled this woman, and she not only became she was a follower of Jesus, but became whole and right and transformed. What would have happened if he didn't stay back to pray? What would have happened if she didn't pray? What would happen if he would have just determined, life was just determined, it was just set, we can't do anything about it? What would have happened? And all throughout the scriptures, you can tell you one story after another. One is in 1 Samuel chapter 3. It's this guy named Eli. I was just reading it recently. He was a high priest. He was one of the head honchos of the people of Israel. And his sons were depraved. They were blaspheming God. They were leading the nation astray. And he would not do what he was supposed to do. So God finally comes to him and says, Eli, I'm going to wipe you and your household out. I'm removing this blessing of serving in this role from you, and I'm giving it to somebody else. And Eli, this supposed man of God, just said, it's the Lord. Let him do whatever he seems right in his eyes. Kind of a fatalist. Kind of like, oh, whatever it is. There was no prayer, no repentance, no change, no response at all. But yet I look throughout it, whenever God calls and he declares something, when he wants us to humble ourselves, he wants us to seek him and move to him, we see how that moves and changes somehow in God's sovereign hand. I don't know how that all works. It's a mystery, but I accept it and I see it. And I believe, I don't question prayer changes things. I believe that prayer changes things. I believe it. It changes people. It changes individuals. It changes cities. It changes nations.